Welcome to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. And now your host, Tim Johnson.
With great support from the business community and a talented staff, BRAC, the Baton Rouge Area Chamber, has transformed itself into one of the top 10 regional economic development organizations in the United States. BRAC also focuses on things like quality of life, worker acquisition and retention, and workforce development. Adam Knapp, President and CEO of the Baton Rouge Area Chamber, joins us when we return on this edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Since 1919, we've designed and constructed hundreds of industrial plants, roads, ships, dams, and executed some of the most complex jobs in the world. In fact, our quality and dependability are legendary. Today, the legend continues as Brown & Root delivers engineering, construction, maintenance, and industrial specialty services throughout the U.S. and the world from our headquarters here in Louisiana. We are Brown & Root.
In Baton Rouge, see your Good Neighbor State Farm agent Brady Flavin for your insurance and financial needs.
For over a quarter century, Kelly's has operated with honesty, integrity, and above all, safety. Kelly's features a fleet of quality equipment operated by dedicated, safety-minded employees skilled in land clearing, above-ground right-of-way maintenance, vegetation control, station yard and manned facility maintenance, above-ground pipeline support, and more. Kelly's Industrial Services, where pipeline right-of-way maintenance gets done right.
Consumers and property owners with construction projects can have a successful result or regretful experiences that could have been avoided. Before any construction project, verify licensure of the contractor and check references. Scammers will claim to be insured or bonded, so always check first. Download our app, LA Contractor, from the Android or Apple Store. Visit our website, lacontractor.org, or contact the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors. We're here to help before things go wrong. Hire a licensed contractor. It's the law.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Adam Knapp, President and CEO of BRAC, the Baton Rouge Area Chamber, is our guest. Adam, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you on the new show. We talked on the radio show earlier, I guess last week, and mentioned that it was your 5th appearance on the radio show, an all-time record. I think this is your 3rd appearance on the television show.
That's awesome.
That's an all-time record as well.
Thank you for having us.
You're sort of our go-to guy.
We try to give you good information.
There you go. Let's talk about BRAC, Baton Rouge Area Chamber. I mentioned in the open, it has really transformed itself into one of the top 10 regional economic development organizations in the country. Great staff, great support from the business community. Talk about your successes in 2015.
You know, it was an important year. It was the last year of our 5-year strategy that we've been operating under since 2011, and so we wanted to go out with a lot of key things we got accomplished. Last year we set a goal of 800 jobs for the year. We ended up with over 1,600 announced jobs through 9 project wins that our team had last year. Twice your goal? Twice the goal. Actually a huge payroll number, over 120 million in annual direct payroll from jobs that will come from the announcements from last year. So a very solid performance for the year, showing the Baton Rouge area is still one of the strongest economic development regions in Louisiana, and that's exciting. It's a credit really to the business community for funding the activity to grow the economy. The other big thing we did last year was focused on transportation, and there's a great challenge not only in the Baton Rouge region but across Louisiana in dealing with the infrastructure needs of the state. And what Baton Rouge as a 9-parish area has lacked has been consensus on what a solution set would look like. There's been a lot of studies, we've been studied to death, so our goal has been to try to get the business community aligned on a set of solutions.
We're going to talk about infrastructure and transportation, traffic a little bit later. I was privileged to hear Congressman Garrett Graves speak last week at an event, and obviously that's what he focused on for this region as well. But before we get there, let's talk about some of the economic growth that we've seen over the last couple of years. I heard Dan Barnett speak a few weeks ago, and he talked about the petrochemical industry, and that's obviously a critical driver for this region. He mentioned sort of $60 billion of announced work in that sector, about $20 billion that has either been completed or is underway, about another $20 billion that's in the pipeline, and about another $20 billion or so that we're not sure about that could be pushed back. So talk about the critical importance of the petrochemical industry and how it's really led job creation in this sector.
So the Baton Rouge area has been doing incredibly well for two big reasons. One is we have had a great deal of downstream announcements in the petrochemical manufacturing sector along the river to give us a huge boost in that segment of our economy. That's been happening for probably 4 or 5 years now. And we still see a number of potential opportunities for new projects in that space. The second amazing part of this is that the Baton Rouge area has quite a density of engineering, industrial construction, and maintenance-related firms that work in the space of the petrochemical industry. And those companies not only benefit from Baton Rouge projects, but projects announced all over the Gulf Coast that are benefiting from low natural gas prices. And so we've seen quite a lot of hiring and job growth continuing in that sector. And so the two-part benefit of that industry plus this subsidiary sector that's growing has really lifted the Baton Rouge area economy. We actually looked in the data on this, and in the last 20 years, we have not seen 2 consecutive years of faster job growth than 2.5%. The Baton Rouge area has been growing 3% or better than 3% in 2014, and in the numbers from last year, over the calendar year, almost 4% in 2015.
So the best performance in the last 20 years and back-to-back years in terms of economic performance and growth. You know, what's interesting is that it's easy to say, well, we've had these low natural gas prices, so a lot of this stuff has just occurred. Yeah. But there's been a lot of work put into these economic development projects. You know, natural gas prices are low in Texas too, right?
That's
so
right.
We had to really compete for these. Talk about that competition, talk about the economic development process, and talk about how critically important incentive packages are in attracting these investments?
It's a great question. There are a lot of things that happen to try to drive the decision-making process toward the Baton Rouge area, toward Louisiana. There are typically 3 big things that matter as part of that process. Now, there may be more, but 3 big ones. One is going to be around the workforce solution necessary to meet a company's needs. That is something that the state of Louisiana has done absolutely well at differentiating themselves on, something that other states, especially Texas, do not have something like the Louisiana Fast Start program, which is an incredible
Jeff
program.
Lynn and his team have just done fabulous.
I know y'all have had them on the show.
Yeah,
they're absolutely great. The second is having really well-defined industrial sites for projects. We've spent an inordinate amount of time and resources certifying industrial sites that are shovel-ready. In many ways, we've gone through the evaluation process to look for any types of problems that might hang up a project if they pick a certain site. And so in doing so, we try to take the risk out of selecting sites in Louisiana over other states.
And these companies, and let's stop on that site selection issue. These companies where they used to might be in a position where they'd announce a project and it was 18 to 24 months before they were ready to move. They're announcing projects and they want these certified sites, these shovel-ready sites, because they're ready to break ground in 6 months.
Absolutely. The time frames have compressed, so our ability as Louisianans to do everything we can to give them answers to questions they're going to need on the front end, that they're not going to wait. They can go to other states, we'll offer them those answers, and we have to be positioned for that. And then the third big thing that goes into projects, as you kind of described, are these incentive packages. And those are meant to be only used as is necessary to try to win a project. But the landscape of economic development across the nation is such that states compete for jobs. It is a very aggressive market and climate. And I'd say we've worked over the last 20 years as a state to make Louisiana's business climate attractive. We've also worked to be better at how we compete and positioning the necessary incentives. Now, those may be to build out the infrastructure of a site, to make sure that rail or various service things are done to get a site ready, or they may just be part of what it takes to win on the workforce side or the general tax competitiveness. All of that is negotiated as a part of a way to win, and you try to go in with as little as possible necessary to get the return on investment to make it a great project for Louisiana.
And you mentioned, we got about 45 seconds left in this segment, you mentioned the competition that exists for these economic development projects, this investment, and you mentioned, we're competing with the rest of the country, but we're really competing with the rest of the world.
That's right.
And we have to be in a position with these incentive packages and the other things we do to be prepared. I want to take a break. I want to come back. I want to get into the Super Region Committee, some of this work you guys are doing there, great work. And I want to talk about your 2016 to 2020 strategic plan, the Think
Great.
Bigger campaign.
Great.
It's important, and we'll talk about it. We're visiting with Adam Knapp. He's the president and CEO of the Baton Rouge Area Chamber, BRAC, and you're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
For more than 25 years, the TJC Group has been helping industry communicate and build relationships with communities, elected officials, and governmental agencies. We are the leading firm in the U.S. for the development, management, and facilitation of industry-based community advisory panels.
Whether you're building a new facility or you manage an existing business, let us put our community and governmental relations experience to work for you.
The TJC Group, facilitating solutions for business and industry.
It might be one of the most efficient, most effective methods of communications we've ever used.
Since 1919, we've designed and constructed hundreds of industrial plants, roads, ships, dams, and executed some of the most complex jobs in the world. In fact, our quality and dependability are legendary. Today, the legend continues as Brown & Root delivers engineering, construction, maintenance, and industrial specialty services throughout the U.S. and the world from our headquarters here in Louisiana. We are Brown & Root.
What if I said that the American dream is alive and well, and that it exists for anyone willing to build it? That the power of a nation does not reside in its monuments, but in the hearts and minds of those who built them, and that the country's greatest heroes also wear hard hats. In today's America, it's not enough to dream about the future. You have to build it. Build your future at byf.org.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Our guest is Adam Knapp. He's president and CEO of BRAC, one of the top 10 regional economic development organizations in the country. Adam, I've been around government and operations in this state for a long, long time, as have you. And for years and years and years, we not only competed against other states and other countries for investment, we competed against each other city to city. Yeah. Now, with the work of G&O Inc., Michael Hecht and his team, the folks in Lafayette, the folks in Lake Charles, BRAC has really undertaken to break down those silos and work more cooperatively with other major cities in the region for economic development, job growth. Talk about these super region committees and
Sure.
their focus and what you're doing.
Well, you think about this. So we looked at places like Orlando and Tampa, Florida, and they exist 80 miles away from each other. We looked at Dallas and Fort Worth, probably 40 miles from each other, Minneapolis and St. Paul, San Jose and San Francisco. These are cities that we think of as almost a combined economic area. And in many ways, that's the way that the world looks at America. They'll see us as these neighboring regions that are interconnected. And so the idea that we should view Lafayette or New Orleans as competitors to Baton Rouge is idiotic.
It's ridiculous.
Right? It's ridiculous.
But we did it for a long, long time.
And in many ways, residents of our communities still do.
Right.
And our job is to try to build those bridges between business leaders of those communities to say, where do we have common interests that if we win, we all win? I was with President Alexander from LSU recently, and he was making the point to some friends in New Orleans. They were saying, what can we do to help you? And his comment, which is exactly in our message line, is we need you to all see LSU is a statewide asset. The talent that goes into all of our communities comes from this institution. The same principle holds true if it's the New Orleans Metro Airport, the International Airport, or in the the oil and gas sector of the Lafayette economy. All of us are interconnected economies, and that then creates the challenge to find those things that we can be for together. The Super Region Committee came out after Katrina with the realization that we had that very stark need to work together, and we forged ourselves together as a partnership in that era. We have been working every other month since then, alternating months to meet in Baton Rouge or New Orleans to take the business community and have them work constructively on projects. And so to try to find those things that if we could get them done, whether it be international trade opportunities, recruiting in new foreign investment, developing the software industry, which has common interest in all these communities, all of us can win if we can go after things together on that. And so the business communities have been trying to align those places to get over these really arbitrary animosities that have been there in the past.
Well, and it's critical that you get legislators on board as well, right? Because a lot of the competition really sort of originated in the legislature as folks wanted to bring projects home to their districts. And so I know you're working on that too. Let's shift gears a little bit. You recently announced your 2016 to 2020 strategic plan, the sort of the Think Bigger campaign. Let's talk about the elements of that plan and why it's important to the future of BRAC.
Well, the idea of this is something that was part of the reinvention of our organization a decade ago. We wanted to make sure that we are not just a Chamber of Commerce asking for you to renew your invoice with us once every year and you're not exactly sure what you're getting for it.
Go cut some ribbons and do some things like that.
The idea was these organizations should have a defined 5-year purpose, write a business plan, achieve that business plan, measure results, rinse,
hold the organization accountable, so to speak.
So the Think Bigger campaign is our third 5-year plan. We developed it over the last 6 months with the business community of the region, asking them the question, if we've made progress in economic development over the last decade, what's the next horizon? What are the big challenges we face, but also what are the exciting things we want to shoot for that could be transformative? And we looked across the country at regions that we think have done very well, and we have outperformed many of those regions in economic growth. So that's a good sign. We've seen our per capita incomes growing at a faster rate than many of the other places. However, we are still well short of where we need to be on talent necessary to grow the economy and then the quality of life necessary to really create a dynamic long-term growth trajectory for this region. And so this plan has 4 elements that are geared toward not only fast rates of growth continuing, but also dealing with those hard, thorny issues that have been challenges. And the business community has said very loudly, it is so impatient for some of these big issues to change, like traffic.
Well, and I think the 4 elements, as you mentioned, are grow and diversify the economy, cultivate talent, focus on quality of life issues, and really focus on the image of the area. So let's talk about a couple of those. We've got about 2 minutes left in this segment. This image perspective, right? We've recently, and you mentioned this, I think, speaking to the Rotary within the last couple of weeks, we've recently lost some investments specifically because of the region's image. Talk about that.
So we had a project we worked in late 2014, and there are always projects we win and lose. That's going to happen. What was interesting to us about this project, it was a transformative opportunity for a research and development center that was considering a location in the Baton Rouge region. It was the only place that they were looking at in the South. It was a company up in the upper Midwest. And when it came down to it, they got us to a short list of 3 places. We had an incredibly good proposal. They wanted to be near LSU and the engineering college there. What came down to was when their executives had to decide what to do in terms of cutting down to 2 from 3, they said, can we see us moving our team from where we are currently to Louisiana and to Baton Rouge? And the answer was, let's just take that off the list. And so what came down to was, it was nothing to do with the economic development incentive package or the location or the building or the workforce plan. It had to do with whether they could convince their leadership to even consider this as an option. They didn't even get on a plane to even look at it. We asked the question, would that have happened if we were Raleigh or Charleston or Nashville? And the answer was no, they probably would have at least taken a look. It has a lot to do with image and the expectations of their people.
And part of that image is the quality of life issues, right? It's education, it's infrastructure, it's beautification. And those are 3 things I want to talk about when we come back from this break, because they are critically important to economic development and growth in our region. We're visiting with Adam Knapp. He's the president and CEO of BRAC, and you're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
For more than 20 years, the TJC Group has been helping companies assess their training needs and to develop programs that improve the effectiveness and productivity of their teams.
Training doesn't have to be expensive or complicated. Let us put our experience and expertise to work for you.
The TJC Group, facilitating solutions for business and industry.
It might be one of the most efficient, most effective methods of communications we've ever used.
In Baton Rouge, see your Good Neighbor State Farm agent Brady Flavin for your insurance and financial needs.
What if I said that whatever good things you build you? And that in this economy, sweat never loses its value? What if I said that there isn't a challenge in the world too great for a craft professional with the right tools? And that the steps that lead from where you are to where you want to be can only be built by you. Build your future at byf.org.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Visiting with Adam Knapp, President and CEO of BRAC. Just quickly, you talk about transformative things, right? Transformational things. Einstein's 100-year-old theory of gravitational waves just was proven in Livingston Parish, Louisiana a couple of weeks ago. What does that mean?
So what's amazing about this, we kind of see this as connected in a few ways. I mean, first of all, it's unbelievably neat to have something like that happen in your community and to have it happen in Livingston Parish. LIGO has been one of those assets that the community has always wondered, what is that thing?
What is it, right?
And what is it doing out there? And it was brought in the late 90s, early 2000 by Congressman Baker to the Baton Rouge area, and he made a huge push to get it. And we actually called him last week to get him kind of involved in the announcements of this. And it was, I think his comment was just wow, this is huge. What's awesome about it is it underscores how important our major research university can be, not only to producing the workforce we want to see for our region and our state, but also that basic research can do transformative things. They likened this kind of discovery to one of those huge monumental shifts in science. And that has happened in partnership with LSU being part of this distributed research enterprise that 1,000 researchers around the world were a part of. And an LSU researcher was the chief spokesperson at the National Press Club that announced this discovery. So it's a great win, if you want to think of it that way, for LSU and for Baton Rouge.
Well, you know, we talked about your strategic plan, and we talked about one of the elements being image. How great is this for the image of Louisiana as a whole, the image of LSU, and some of the things we're trying to accomplish there? So let's segue back into that. Image is critically important. You talked about losing some economic development, some investment because of maybe an uninformed image that people had of our state, but it's critically important that we work on it. A couple of the elements that go into image, right? Education, infrastructure, transportation, right? Quality of life kind of things. Talk about those specifically. Let's focus on traffic and transportation. It is critical that we start to solve this problem in our region.
So our planning committee felt that a plan has to be very specific and calling out in the next 5 years major things that need to be addressed. And again, going back to that sense of impatience and that sense of urgency that's kind of running throughout the strategic plan for the year 2020 for us. And it came down to three things really that they wanted to emphasize. First is, by the end of this 5 years of work, we have to have secured a solution to the I-10 problem. It is a fundamental need for this region. It's 20 or 30 years old to have not been addressed. And so this calls on BRAC to say we're going to hold ourselves accountable to organizing the community, the region, the state, pushing our political strategy around this to finding whatever that solution looks like. And so a lot of that is informing our work. The second area is to try to make sure that throughout the 9-parish area there are better educational choices. To know that that K-12 education is not just the product of the traditional school systems, although it is part of that. It is also having many school choices and options that are available to parents for public education, to know that we could have a brand in the region as having high quality choices that are available to us. The third area is one that BRAC has not been involved in before, which is to work in physical attractiveness of the community. And a lot of the places that businesses and talent consider moving to instead of Baton Rouge are better maintained, have a much more visually attractive place. And so in many ways we've let mediocrity continue, and it's incumbent upon us to be more aggressive at pushing that issue.
A couple of points on those issues. Number one, this whole beautification idea. We talked about this on the radio. Our mutual friend and Chamber Board, BRAC board member Lee Jenkins of Performance Contractors is really heavy on this issue. He travels all over the country and he sees the differences in how just the aesthetics of a community are maintained, and we've got to do more there because we are significantly behind. Give us about 30, 40 seconds on CRISIS, Capital Region Industry for Sustainable Infrastructure Solutions.
Yeah.
They really are focusing, that's a mouthful.
It's an acronym just so you can say crisis.
Is exactly. But they're focusing on real data in terms of making regional decisions about solving these traffic problems.
Yeah.
Give us a minute on that.
The idea was that if our challenge is consensus, and the business community can only hold itself accountable for having not helped get to consensus in the region's parishes, we thought we need to gather industry leaders, business leaders, and have them look at the data and come to a set of solutions that they can say, we're all in agreement. There's no disagreement between Livingston and Iberville and West Baton Rouge and Ascension and East Baton Rouge. We all want to see the same set of solutions brought forward. So if folks go to trafficcrisis.org, they'll be able to see the plan and the research that was done. What we want to do is get past the period of being studied to death and get to a common set of solutions that will deliver it. And that's what our now legislative agenda will be focused on, is the money necessary to fund those mega projects.
I mentioned that I heard Congressman Garrett Graves speak last week, and one of the things he said was back when the timed program was developed and the 4-cent gasoline tax was put forward for that, he said the reason that the Capital Region didn't get many projects is because we could never agree on what those projects should be while other regions did. About a minute and a half left. The elephant in the room, obviously, is we're sort of in the middle of the legislative session now. We're taping a week ahead of time for this show, so we can't give real-time information. But in 30 seconds, and I know this is putting you on the spot a little bit, talk about long-term solutions to the structural budget issues that this state faces.
Just in short, the challenge faced by the legislature is enormous, and it's incumbent upon the business community to respond in the level of seriousness at the crisis. So we view this in three ways. One is we have to look for every possibility for spending reductions to make sure that government lives within its means where possible, knowing that cannot be alone the answer, and we accept that. Second is to call for structural changes that even if they cannot be accomplished in this special session, that they be on the table, that those are negotiated for long-term solutions that the administration will commit to. And then third is, if there have to be revenue raisers, which unfortunately that's a very significant likelihood, that you do so with a mindset that we want to avoid the worst possible harm to our state's competitiveness.
Keep the economy growing. Adam Knapp, BRAC, always a pleasure, buddy. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
That's a wrap, guys. Thanks for joining us. Join us again next week at this very same time for another edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.